Welcome to On the Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to break down Noche UFC, which goes down this weekend. On paper, we've got a phenomenal card. Honestly, looking at this from top to bottom, I think we're going to have some outstanding fights, and the UFC has got a lot to live up to after the last event at UFC Paris, which saw, I believe it was 11 finishers throughout the card. The judges were needed hardly at all, and I'm sure that 11 finishers ties a UFC record as well. So yeah, look, this event has definitely got a lot to live up to from last weekend, but I absolutely think it could. Like, these fights, even though we don't see, or we might not see as many finishes as last weekend, I just think this card has just got some real firefights. So I've always said I think I would rather prefer to watch a 3-round war back and forth, either fighter having moments, knockdowns, wrestling, grappling, just an insane war than, you know, a 30-second knockout. So if that's what we get from this card, which I think we've got a good possibility of getting, then I'll be very happy indeed. But what I will say is I don't think this Noche UFC will live up to the last Noche UFC, which of course we had at the Sphere, which was just an unbelievable event. Like, you know, having Noche UFC this weekend just made me think last night and go back to, you know, the videos and the clips. I went onto Twitter rather than watching an entire event back, but what we actually experienced last year for Noche UFC was just unbelievable, and I really hope the UFC go back to the Sphere at some point, because just what an experience. I've never seen anything like it in my life, and I can't even imagine what it would have been like to be in the crowd. But yeah, look, this Noche UFC won't be the Sphere Noche UFC, but it's going to be interesting to see how the UFC really do make this a special event, because a Noche UFC is, of course, always a special event. So yeah, looking forward to the event, looking forward to seeing what the UFC do, and how good the event looks from a graphical and an artwork perspective as well. Now, just before we get into the breakdowns, and I'll try and make this super quick because we have got 14 fights to get through. If you want to jump into the action this weekend from a betting perspective, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler. If you're a long-term gambler that likes to make your own final decisions, but you do like to read written breakdowns to see why we're recommending certain bets, then we've got a long-term gambler section for you. If you're somebody that just likes the fun parlays, you know, like to build your own parlays, or maybe you don't want to do any work yourself and you want pre-built parlays, we've got a fun gambler section for you as well. Or if you are somebody simply that, again, doesn't want to put any work or any effort in, and you just want to tailor professional handicapper, then we've got an official bet section for you, which is the bets that are being played with the handicapper's money, which of course I am the handicapper. We've got an official bet section for you. And then of course, with all betting subscriptions comes Base AI, our UFC prediction software, which is firing like crazy this year. Super good. And it's picking out some crazy underdogs as well week on week. So that's definitely worth checking out. I love Base AI personally. I think it's a phenomenal piece of software, a phenomenal piece of AI, and something that, like I say, just surprises me week in, week out. And the best part of all this is our prices are super affordable. Our ethos is we want you to make your money back as quickly as you possibly can, so you can start profiting on top of your bets, and we do that with the prices that we set the subscriptions at. If we're charging $500 for an annual subscription, for example, it's going to make it much harder for you to make your money back before you can start profiting on top of your bets. So, like I say, it's $5 for one event, it's $10 a month, or it's $99 for an entire year, which again, from that betting side, that betting perspective, is super affordable. And that's all at MMAplay365.com. And with the introduction out the way, with the promo out the way, let's get down to breaking some fights down. And of course, as always, we start in the main event. It's an absolute fire main event. 5 rounds of this. I really hope there's no finish early in this fight, because if this is 5 rounds, 25 minutes, it's going to be an absolute war. We've got Diego Lopes versus Gian Silva. Now, Gian Silva, of course, of the Fighting Nerds, had a very forgettable event last weekend at UFC Paris with, of course, Mauricio Hufi getting soundly beaten and finished, and then we had Caio Bahayo getting soundly beaten as well. So that was the main event and the co-main event that the Fighting Nerds had, that they both dropped those fights. And now we've got another Fighting Nerds fighter in the main event here against Diego Lopes. And look, I think Gian Silva, I don't know whether it's recency bias that I'm just saying this, because I do and rate, sorry, not hate, definitely not hate. I do and did rate Caio Bahayo very highly. But Gian Silva could potentially be the best one out of the Fighting Nerds. You know, he's just super aggressive, super powerful, in your face, and we are still yet to see a real test from a wrestling and grappling perspective with Gian Silva. But the reason why we're yet to really see that is for two reasons. One, you know, the level of competition. Like, his level of competition's been okay, but he hasn't fought like an elite specialist in any of those areas. But the thing is, the other reason is that Gian Silva's so aggressive and overwhelming with that forward pressure that it's going to be difficult for someone to take him down and get him down to the mat, because like I say, if he's the one pushing the opponent on the back foot, it's very difficult to hit takedowns, and maybe you can crash the pocket a little bit and try and tie up with Silva to maybe trip him down to the mat. But again, if you're going to have to come through that boxing range, it's going to be a dangerous area to come through, because Silva packs heat, packs power, throws combinations. Yeah, it's going to be really difficult for somebody to get Silva down, but I don't think anybody is going to ever have 100% takedown defense in the UFC. I think every fighter can be taken down. And the thing is with Gian Silva, like I've already said, you know, he's not faced an elite specialist yet. But here, he's facing an elite specialist in Diego Lopes, who is just an unbelievable grappler. Like, one of the best grapplers in the division. He's got coral belts in his family. I think all of his siblings and uncles and parents are like black belts in jiu-jitsu as well. So, in fact, it's his uncle, I think, that's the coral belt. But, like, Lopes has got jiu-jitsu in his family, jiu-jitsu in his blood. And he's legitimately one of the most dangerous submission artists in the division. Like, his grappling is, like I say, I can't say anymore. It's just at an elite level. You know, he's a specialist. It's almost like when Damian Maia gets you down to the mat, you know that he's going to do good work. You know he's going to work you. And Lopes is the same in that instance. I'm not saying he's as good as what Damian Maia was, but I'm just saying, if Lopes gets an opponent down to the mat, he's going to do good work. Like, you know that he's going to be just an absolute savage and a nightmare on top grappling. And this is where this fight is interesting, because, like I say, Silva, yeah, I think it's a super close and competitive fight, by the way. And the first thing, before I actually get into this, I'm shocked to see that we've got a minus 300 favourite in this fight. Like, regardless of which way that's going, and I will tell you in a minute, it's so surprising there's a minus 300 favourite with how close and competitive this fight is. And of course, it's Gian Silva that's the minus 300 favourite. And the fact that you can get Lopes at like plus 250 in a fight that's super close. I mean, from a betting perspective, Diego Lopes is the side. Like, I just don't see any value in Gian Silva at minus 300 in a fight that could run very, very close. You know, Lopes, we've got an elite specialist here. And an elite specialist at plus 200 and plus 250 is always going to give you a fighting chance. But not only that, Diego Lopes has just gone, you know, toe-to-toe with Alexander Volkanovski in a championship fight over 5 rounds. And yes, you're going to get people saying, oh yeah, well, he was soundly beaten there. And he was on the scorecards. But if you go and watch that fight back, like, yeah, Diego Lopes, you could see that there was a technical... There was a skilled technical gap from a striking perspective between the two. You can see that. It's clear. But Gian Silva isn't as technical as Alexander Volkanovski. Volkanovski is one of the best to ever do it, and has clearly still got it as well. Like, Lopes, that fight was competitive. And it was way more competitive when you consider that Diego Lopes is predominantly a grappler and the striking's catching up. And he had to go for a technical striking battle with an Alexander Volkanovski, and Lopes held his own. Like, the striking's catching up. And again, you go back to the betting line here with Gian Silva. Like, you've got Diego Lopes that's striking competitively or relatively competitively with Alexander Volkanovski. You've got Lopes, who is one of the most elite grapplers in mixed martial arts and in the UFC. The wrestling, I still think that Lopes that's the area for me that Lopes should be developing, because I think he lacks a little bit there, and obviously the wrestling helps him get fights into his world, which is on the mat. So you've still got a fighter that's competing at the top of the game, that's got probably a weakness in his strike, and that's probably his weak part of his game, but he's going toe-to-toe with Alexander Volkanovski and being relatively competitive. And then he's got the elite grappling as well, but then he's a plus 250 underdog. Like, it's crazy. Now, look, from a stylistic perspective, the fight's super interesting. Like I've said, you've got all that great stuff happening with Diego Lopes, but the thing is, Gian Silva, he's got knockout power, he's super aggressive, in your face, overwhelming. He's going to make it very difficult for you to take him down. But I don't know, like, look, it's a super competitive fight. I could easily see Gian Silva coming into this fight and knocking Lopes out early, landing something on him, hurting him and taking him out. We've seen him do that so many times before. But Lopes is durable. He is a dog. I just don't know if he's going to go down like that or that quickly and easily. I could also see Gian Silva, pouring on an insane pace over 5 rounds and taking 3 rounds and winning a decision on the judges' scorecards. But I could also see Diego Lopes coming in with a crazy good game plan where he's super patient, not letting Gian Silva overwhelm him, using technical striking to maybe keep Gian Silva at range, because Lopes is the taller and longer fighter here. And then potentially when Silva is crashing at him, going full hog there, getting into the clinch, maybe getting Silva down, maybe doing some good work from a grappling perspective. Let's not forget that Diego Lopes has got power in his hands as well. He's huge for the division. I could just see this fight going in like a multitude of so many different ways. Finishes, decisions, round by rounds. It's a real hard one to predict from my perspective. So with this being a betting podcast, and I say this more often than not, in these super competitive fights, especially at the highest level, like this is a high level mixed martial arts fight in the featherweight division. In these types of fights where I just think it's super close and competitive and can go completely different ways for each fighter, I'm just going to side with who the underdog is. And the fact is, in this fight, we've got a relatively sized underdog as well, which I think is unjustified. So for those reasons, for the sake of a pick and prediction, I'm picking Diego Lopes to win this fight. And in the next fight, the co-main event, we've got Rob Font versus David Martinez. Now, this fight from an opponent perspective is short notice for both guys. Rob Font was already on this card. He should have been fighting Raul Rosas Jr. A bit disappointed that fight got cancelled, actually, with Rosas Jr. pulling out, because I think that would have been very interesting from a stylistic perspective. But David Martinez was also on this card against Carlos Vera. Now, it's difficult here because, of course, David Martinez has now got a massive step up in competition, not just for where he is in his career, but from who he was supposed to be fighting. No disrespect to Carlos Vera, but he is nowhere near Rob Font. Now, from Rob Font's perspective, he's probably got maybe a little step down, at least from an experience perspective, from where Raul Rosas Jr. is, but he's got a completely different style of fighter in front of him. So, you can make an argument that, look, David Martinez has got a way harder opponent than his previous opponent, but he's got someone that's a very similar skill set, whereas Rob Font, he's got maybe a slightly lesser opponent, but man, a completely different style. So if Rob Font's just been training all camp for defending the takedown, if he's taken down, getting back up to his feet, and had a game plan from a defensive wrestling perspective, or at least working to be very anti-wrestling in this fight, well, that can be all thrown out the window because David Martinez is not that type of fighter. Now, again, you can't ignore the fact that David Martinez is taking a huge step up in competition. I mean, who fights somebody like Rob Font on your second UFC fight? Like, David Martinez ran through his first opponent, kind of expected. But, like I say, Rob Font is just a fighter that's been at the top of the division for years, has fought the best of the best in the division. And for Martinez as a young kid as well, going in against Rob Font, listen, one of two things is going to happen here. Because, look, Rob Font's a veteran, he's super skilled, been around for years, ton of experience, right? But Rob Font is, I wouldn't say he's declining, or he's on a hard decline, but he's definitely not the fighter he was 5 years ago. Like, that's all I'm saying there. So one or two things is going to happen here. Either David Martinez is going to come into this fight and show that Rob Font is on a decline, really put the pressure on him, overwhelm him, maybe knock him out, and not only establish himself in the division 2 fights in, but also, like I say, maybe we're thinking, okay, well, is Rob Font, kind of on a decline here, or we're going to see David Martinez way over his head, too big of a step up, 2 fights into his UFC career, and Rob Font is going to show that there's a reason why experience and levels matter here. So that you're going to get one of 2 things here. I know it's a cliche because you're either going one fighter wins or the other fighter wins, but like that's what we're going to see. And it's difficult because, like I say, Rob Font has got all the experience, but the thing is with David Martinez, he's probably got a striking fight here with Rob Font, unless Rob Font really throws a spanner in everything, twists things up, and gets to wrestling David Martinez. But the thing is, that's not Rob Font's primary. He can wrestle and grapple, but that's not where he's predominantly best. So can he do that for 3 rounds and hold cardio? But what if David Martinez starts stuffing takedowns? Then Rob Font's going to think, okay, well, now I've got to stand with this guy. But then Martinez is going to have a load of momentum because he's thinking, well, Rob Font doesn't want to strike with me, and now he can't take me down, and then starts pouring it on. So unless we get that twist of style from Rob Font, we're going to have a striking fight here. And yes, Rob Font is, like I say, more experienced from a technical perspective. He's probably the more technical striker here as well. But David Martinez is so aggressive, in your face, overwhelming, pressure, combinations, volume. But not only that, he's got power. He's got that youthful power. He's got speed in his movement and his strikes as well. That youthful energy inside the cage. And you really could go either way here. Now, typically what you get with this type of fight historically in the UFC is you get the young, up-and-comer, hungry, dangerous, crazy fighter that everybody's super high on against this older veteran, experienced veteran in the UFC. You see the experienced veteran as the underdog, and then you're thinking, okay, well, how many times have we seen this happen before? You bet the underdog because he's the experienced vet, and the experienced vet ends up, giving a lesson to his opponent. And we see that time and time again. But it's different here because David Martinez is the underdog. So now you're thinking, well, do you want to play Rob Font? Do you want to pay the juice on Rob Font? Bit chalky, maybe, for some people. Do you want to play Rob Font as the favourite here against that young, hungry, up-and-coming fighter? Well, it's definitely not as attractive as what it would be if he was an underdog. And then you're actually looking at the underdog here in David Martinez and thinking, well, even if he loses, pre-fight is going to be super live, super aggressive, powerful, quick, combinations, overwhelms his opponents. He's got all the attributes that you would look for a live underdog. So from a betting perspective, like I say, we're used to taking these experienced vets at real bad lines with them being placed as the underdog. But here, it's like the market is respecting Rob Font. And I'm thinking, well, maybe David Martinez is a live underdog here. And when you're looking at underdogs on this card, if you're going to pick any to be super live, like David Martinez is a live underdog. Like I say, fast, powerful, hits hard, combinations, volume, youthful energy, speed. He's a live underdog. Now, it's kind of like my head's telling me that Rob Font's going to win, though. And that's the issue. I do put a lot of emphasis in the experienced veteran. I do think Rob Font has got a good chance of winning this fight, but from a betting perspective, he's just not going to be anyone that you'd go anywhere near. And if you are putting money on this fight, Martinez has decided is the underdog because he's a live underdog, and that's key and important. So, look, I'm going to go with my head and pick Rob Font. But like I say, if you are betting this fight, then it's Martinez that's the live underdog. So for a straight pick and prediction perspective, I'm picking Rob Font to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is an interesting fight as well. We've got Jared Gordon versus Rafa Garcia. Now, Jared Gordon, a relatively sized favourite here. We've got Garcia that the last time I looked could be had at around plus 200. It's a fight that I think is closer than the odds suggest. I think Rafa Garcia is going to be live against any fighter at this type of level. Now, the thing is with Garcia, you look at his record, and he doesn't fight too many fighters in and around his own level. He either fights way above his level or way below his level. When he fights above his level, he loses, which you would expect because he's fighting way above his level. And when he wins, he's he's beating the guys that are way below his level, which you would expect. Now, the thing is with Jared Gordon, this is probably one of the first fights, in my opinion, that's in and around Garcia's level that makes it super close. But the thing is, I feel like if you look on the spectrum of if Jared Gordon and Garcia are very similar, does Jared Gordon fall in the category closer to a level above or closer to, if you're taking him off that middle line, does he go slightly above where he's a little bit slightly above Garcia's level, or does he go below that where he's slightly below Garcia's level, even though they're very close? And I would say Gordon is closer to being above Garcia's level, but again, we're talking not too much at all. Like, there's not great edges in this fight. The thing is with Jared Gordon, though, is he gets good wins. Like, look at his last win against Thiago Moises. I bet Moises in that fight. I thought Moises was going to do good work. Gordon, getting up there in age, has been around for a lot of years. Body, miles on the clock. The body must be pretty beat up at this point as well. But he routinely shows and consistently shows that he's got these performances in him, to the point where people do question where he's at, and then he comes out with a massive performance. So that kind of throws you in this fight, because I'm leaning towards the Garcia side. Now, for someone to beat Jared Gordon, you've got to be able to handle the technical striking. Like Gordon, I know he got a big finish against Thiago Moises, but typically speaking, Gordon isn't known for his knockout power. He's known for good technical striking, volume striking, mixing in wrestling and grappling. He's got a really good all-round style. So for someone to beat Gordon, you've got to be able to compete with him effectively in all those areas. And I think Garcia can. I do think Gordon's a slightly better striker. Granted, I'll give him that. But I don't think Gordon is going to have a bucket load of success with the wrestling and grappling against Garcia, because Garcia can wrestle and grapple himself. And actually, Gordon's been got at previously as well with wrestling and grappling. It's not easy, but he can be got at. So I'm just thinking here, we've got a fight that is going to be super close striking, is going to be super close wrestling, is going to be super close grappling against two fighters that have got really good cardio, two fighters that have both got a good level of skill set in all the disciplines, both offensively and defensively as well. And I'm not going to be shocked to see a split decision type of fight here. And in a split decision type of fight, I'm always going to favour the underdog. And the underdog is Rafa Garcia, who's roughly around plus 200 the last time I looked. So it's not as if you're getting a plus 110 underdog, and it's like, it makes it even harder to decide. Like, it's an easy decision of who I'm going to pick to win this fight because of how close I think this fight's going to run, because they just both match up so well. I'm not going to be surprised to see Jared Gordon win a decision. I'm not going to be shocked to see Rafa Garcia win a decision either. Again, as I always say, if I don't watch this event and I wake up the morning after and I look on Tapology and I see Rafa Garcia's won a decision, well, yeah, I'm not going to look at that and think, oh wow, didn't expect that. Like, no, I'm not going to think that at all. I just think it's going to be a fight that runs super close. Even if there's a unanimous decision, it could be one of those fights where every single round is super close. You can still have a super close fight and a unanimous decision, which again is a concept a lot of people aren't aware of and think that isn't true, but it absolutely is. So look, I'm digressing, but I think it's a super close fight that's going to run super close, and I'm going to side with the underdog. So I'm picking Rafa Garcia to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Kelvin Gastelum versus Dustin Stoltzfus. Now, pretty simple breakdown here. I think that this fight is simply a levels fight. I think Kelvin Gastelum's a level above Dustin Stoltzfus. Stoltzfus is a fighter that's got, again, a good all-round skill set, prefers to wrestle and grapple, but I just don't see him getting Kelvin Gastelum down and doing good work on top of him, which I think is where Stoltzfus is going to need this fight to run and play out for him to have any chance of winning. Now, when you look at the betting line, you've got Kelvin Gastelum that can be had at minus 250. It was slightly less yesterday, so the line is creeping up because he can also go as high depending on what book you're looking at. It can also be as high as like minus 270, minus 280. I honestly think that's going to keep creeping up. I think he could end up at like closing at about minus 400, which I think is where the true line is, if I'm being honest. Because look, outside of a massive knockout, which obviously can happen at this level in the UFC with 4-ounce gloves, they're not light fighters either. So I do think, there's always a puncher's chance in every single fight. But where does Stoltzfus actually win? Does he win a 3-round volume fight against Gastelum? Well, no. Does he win a wrestling heavy fight against Gastelum? Well, no. Does he win a grappling fight against Gastelum? Well, he's got to get the wrestling going he's got to have success wrestling to get the success grappling. No, like, I just think Gastelum is a better striker, he's a better wrestler, he's a better grappler, all offensively and defensively. I think the cardio's fine, he's got the experience edge over him as well. And look, Gastelum's at a point in his career where it's crazy how young he actually is because he's been around forever. And you do have miles on the clock that comes with that. So he's no longer being able to compete with the top of the division like he used to be able to. But fighting the Dustin Stoltzfus of the world, and this is no respect to Dustin Stoltzfus. It's not that I think Dustin Stoltzfus isn't a UFC caliber fighter, because he is. It's just there's levels in MMA, and in the UFC there's levels, and Gastelum's just levels above Stoltzfus. This is one where, if I was not to watch this event and I woke up the following morning and I looked on Tapology to see Stoltzfus has beaten Gastelum, that is one that I would look at and be, holy shit, I'm shocked. Like, how has he managed to do that? Like, so yeah, pretty clean and simple breakdown. I'm picking Kelvin Gastelum to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Alexander Hernandez versus Diego Ferreira. Now, Alexander Hernandez, real quick turnaround for him. And I love to see this as well, because this means 2 paydays in such a short period of time. Always good to see that. Well, Hernandez only fought a couple of weeks ago against Chase Hooper, got a real quick knockout in round 1, brutal knockout, and now the UFC have booked him here. Now, from a betting perspective, you've got Alexander Hernandez, who's now coming into this fight as a slight favourite against Diego Ferreira. Bear in mind, he was a big underdog against Chase Hooper, so there's clearly market correction in this. There's clearly recency bias in this betting line, and the question you've got to ask is, has Alexander Hernandez turned a corner because he's now on a bit of a win streak, or has he just had favourable opponents with some fortunate results? And you can honestly argue both ways there. I'm probably going to sit on the fence with that, unfortunately. I wouldn't say that he's turned the corner. I just need to see him against slightly better level of competition now in the UFC. Not that he's been fighting bad level of competition, but fighting step-ups in competition. Like, if he goes in here and beats Diego Ferreira comfortably, then yeah, I'll be jumping on that side of he's turned a corner and now we're seeing a different Alexander Hernandez. But on the flip side, I'm also not going to sit here and say that he's had a good run of competition or a favourable run of competition and some fortunate results, because you create your own fortune in this game. It's mixed martial arts. So yeah, I'm on the fence with where Alexander Hernandez is at. But with Diego Ferreira, he's an aging fighter, and again, a fighter that's been around for years, but he's not been as active, for example, as a Kelvin Gastelum or in as many wars. So the miles on the clock for Ferreira from a damage perspective just aren't there. I still think he's a fresh version of himself. I still think he's an elite fighter he's got an elite skill set with his grappling. Like, he's a super dangerous grappler. So, and look, with Ferreira, his last 3 fights, he beats and knocks out Michael Johnson, then he beats Mateusz Rebecki, and then he drops Grant Dawson. Drops the fight against Grant Dawson. He didn't drop him. Grant Dawson beat him comfortably. But Grant Dawson is a fighter I really like. He's a super difficult fighter to beat as well at this level. So, I kind of disregard that fight for Ferreira, because Alexander Hernandez isn't Grant Dawson, nowhere close. So Ferreira's still got it. He's still got stuff in the tank as well. And he's competing and being competitive against the top fighters as well. So again, it's like, you've got Hernandez, who's going to be coming into this fight on a ton of momentum. He's going to have a ton of confidence. He's going to come out. He's going to let his hands go. He's going to try and swing, try and knock Ferreira out. I guarantee that. It's almost like a shark that smells the blood, Alexander Hernandez has got that knockout, a big knockout. So big of a knockout, he's turned a fight around in a couple of weeks, and now he's fighting again. He's going to go for a knockout here. And does Ferreira get hit with the bomb and get knocked out, or does he get this fight grinding? And I don't know. Because of the fact that I'm unsure if Hernandez has turned that corner yet, I am going to be siding with Ferreira. I think if Ferreira can get Hernandez down to the mat, then he's going to have a good time on top of Hernandez. Hernandez can be taken down and he can be grappled on. We've seen that multiple times. Ferreira might be the best grappler that Alexander Hernandez has fought, at least recently. So I do think that Ferreira's got paths to victory in this fight. I think it's going to be all Hernandez early on in this fight. definitely. Remember, this is going to be a couple of weight cuts as well in a couple of weeks. So, yeah, it's all well and good getting a quick turnaround, but you've got to think of, the other stuff outside of that. So it's going to be two weight cuts in a few weeks. That might take its toll if this fight does go into, if Ferreira's a dog in this fight, which I'm sure he will be, and, weathers a storm early on and takes this fight late, and Hernandez starts slowing down, well, Ferreira's going to absolutely rip him late in this fight. So that's the kind of way I'm leaning here. I think Hernandez is going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with early, but then I think that if he doesn't get Ferreira out, which I'm banking he doesn't, I think Ferreira takes over late and wins the fight. So for those reasons, I'm picking Diego Ferreira to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got UFC newcomer Santiago Luna versus Quang Lee. Now, it's super funny, this. Like, it really is hilarious. When you've been in this game for a long, long, long time like I have, we see this, or I've seen this so many times over the years. Before I even watched tape on Santiago Luna, because I didn't know who he was. So before I watched tape on Luna, I had no idea who he was, and the first thing that I do is I look at the paper things. I paper base a fighter first before I then go and watch what they look like in a cage. And when I saw that Santiago Luna is 6-0 from Mexico, trains out of Entram Gym, and he's 21 years old, and he's got a ton of finishers quite early on, but he hasn't really fought, apart from the one guy at 6-1, which again, you can go down a rabbit hole with that. He hasn't really fought the best level of competition. I knew straight away what type of fighter that we've got before I even watched tape on him. I knew his style. I knew what he was going to look like, how he approaches fights. I just knew what I was going to see before I saw it. And then when I watched the tape, I was like, well, like I knew what I was going to see. And that's a young fighter that's super green, but super explosive, super, excitable inside the cage, has got sneaky good power for a low weight class, and has been comfortably handling the fighters that he's supposed to be comfortably handling, and then gets a UFC shot without a contender series. So now he's fighting in a huge promotion at such a young age, off the back of finishers with minimal experience, against a fighter that is very experienced, road to UFC, then he's had UFC fights as well, won some, lost some, but ultimately has got experience, and I suppose, you could say is a much more experienced veteran than Santiago Luna, but then, it's Noche UFC and Luna's Mexican. Like, honestly, I've just seen this a million times, and one of two things is going to happen, and I know it's a cliche. I've said it already on this podcast with a different fight. Yeah? At some point, Santiago Luna is going to lose a fight he should absolutely, or at least the betting market is saying should absolutely win. Like, he's gonna lose a fight where everybody's hyped him, everybody's betting on him because he's a good betting line and people are seeing a ton of value, and he's gonna go in that cage and he's gonna have a flat performance, lose. The next fight is gonna be an underdog. He's gonna destroy that guy as an underdog and then go on a win streak and come back to this podcast in after Luna's had 3 more fights, and I bet you it's something along those sort of lines, right? Is this fight gonna be that fight where Santiago Luna takes that step up in competition? The lines are quite close, pretty much even. Last time I looked, dead even pick 'em. Some bookies throughout the last few days have had Luna as an underdog. Some have had him as the favourite. It's a very, very close betting line. So the bottom line here is he is playable right now. But is it going to be this fight? Or is Quang Lee going to show him that there's levels, and that the UFC, he's dealt with a higher level of competition, and Luna comes in here, bright lights, debut jitters, and just really doesn't perform, or, faces an opponent that is much tougher and better than he expects because of his previous level of competition? Which way is it going to go? And honestly, it could go either way. Again, I know I reference it a lot lately. If I don't watch the event and I wake up in the morning and look at Tapology to see the results, I'm not going to be shocked to see the fighter of getting the win here. And the betting line kind of says the same as well. Like, it's not really showing too much of an edge between each fighter from a betting perspective. So take your pick. Look, for me, the way I'm going with this one is I think that Santiago Luna actually gets the job done here. I think he gets the job done. I think he gets it done convincingly. I think he gets Quang Lee out of there, right? But it's going to be the next fight. that he loses. I think I think he's got enough to sting somebody like Kang Lee. I think he's young enough to not have the debut jitters. I think the debut jitters maybe come in for fighters making the UFC debut at a slightly older age. I think at this age, everybody remembers being your early 20s, your teens and early 20s, like you just don't have any fear of anything. So Santiago Luna, I think, is not going to have the debut jitters. He's going to come out here. I think he's got enough to put something on Quang Lee and knock him out. But then he's going to get a step up in competition in his next fight, and he's going to be like minus 400. And I think that's the fight he's going to lose. So for this fight, I'm going Luna. I'm picking Santiago Luna to win this fight. In the next fight, we've got a really important fight here for both fighters. I think we've got Jose Medina versus Dusko Todorovic. Now, to give you an example and a reason why I think it's an important fight is in both of their combined last 6 fights under the UFC banner. So for Medina, that includes the Contender Series. So in both of their last 6 fights, they are 0-6. That's a 3-fight losing streak for Medina. That's a 3-fight losing streak for Todorovic. So it's a really important fight because both fighters are going to need a win here if they are going to want to prolong the UFC career, shall we say. And it's always, I'll be honest, it's always shit me saying this, but that's just the reality of the situation. Like a 3-fight losing streak is very much like it's go time now in the UFC. You need to pick up that win. So the fact that both of them are on 3-fight losing streaks is, it definitely makes this fight super important. I think there's going to be a lot of nerves for both fighters as well because of that. Because they're both, they're not daft. They both know the situation. They're both going to know what they're going to be up against. Now for Todorovic actually fought quite a lot in the UFC. So when it comes to UFC experience, he's definitely the one with the edge here. And he's got 3 wins in the UFC. The only problem with that is those 3 wins are Dequan Townsend, who's definitely no longer with the UFC, Maki Pitolo no longer with the UFC, and Jordan Wright no longer with the UFC. So they were all sort of like, his wins in the UFC were kind of bottom of the barrel wins, and fights that I think he will have been a big favourite going into all 3 of them. So yeah, that's Todorovic. He has got wins in the UFC, might help him here. I do think though, look, Todorovic is quite a big favourite in this fight, and I agree with it. Medina's a fighter that, his best attribute is being tough and durable, which if that's your best attribute as a UFC level fighter, then you've got problems because, like I say, look, his skill set is well-rounded. He can strike, wrestle, grab, like he's got a skill set. He's in the UFC for a reason, but I just don't think he's a UFC caliber fighter. I think he might still be the only fighter that's ever been signed from the Contender Series, and I mean direct on the night of the Contender Series after taking a loss, a decision loss as well. Like Dana White saw something in Medina, he took a decision loss, and he still got a contract on the night. I don't think that's ever happened before, and I still don't think it's happened still. So Medina, Medina was always coming into the UFC kind of on the back foot a little bit here. And Todorovic has got his problems. And again, if Todorovic comes into this fight exchanging in a war, then the one thing Medina's got, the toughness and durability, is something that Todorovic lacks. The durability, I think, has been cracked and broken. We kind of sensed that was going to happen at some point because of how high he hangs his chin, even moving backwards, and his hands are low and his chin's out. He's almost like inviting his opponent to knock him out, and eventually he was going to get got at, and he has been got at a couple of times now. So if this comes down to a battle of exchanges, it's going to be a battle of who's tougher. And look, Jose Medina's tougher and more durable, but Dusko Todorovic has got a much wider variety within his skill set. Like, I don't think he's going to go to war. I actually think he's going to take Medina down and ground and pound him. Because Todorovic has got some nasty ground and pound. He's got a good top game. It's just against a certain level of competition in the UFC, he's not able to, the skill set doesn't really allow for that. Because, like I say, he is lower down in the division. But against someone like Jose Medina, I think Todorovic is going to take him down. I don't think he's going to risk standing and going toe-to-toe with somebody that is literally an insane nail. Like, some people are either great hammers or great nails. The best fighters are both. Medina's an insane nail. Like, he can get hit and hit and hit and hit and not really go anywhere. Dusko Todorovic, I don't think he's going to want to get into that type of fight with Medina. I think he's going to take him down. I think he's going to ground and pound him, maybe get a submission. I think Todorovic has got the biggest gap in skill here. I think he's the more likely to find his path to victory as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Dusko Todorovic to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is a fight that I've been back and forth on this, to be honest. We've got Claudio Puelles versus Joaquim Silva. Now, the reason I've been back and forth is because I kind of think both fighters are similar of where they're at right now. But there is one thing that's led me to pick the fighter that I'm going to be picking to win, which I'll talk about very soon. But look, from Joaquim Silva's perspective, he's a fighter that I've loved to watch over the years. Super aggressive, striking, has got a grappling game to go with it as well. It's just when you actually look at Joaquim Silva's wins, at least recently, his wins are against Jesse Ronson, who's no longer in the UFC, and Clay Guida, who's like 105 years old now. Even though Clay Guida's 105 years old, I do want to make it clear that the dude is still looking in phenomenal shape. You know, he's in a better shape than most people 10, 15 years younger than him. So, and look, you know, Clay Guida can still go. He can still fight. It's just, like I say, that it's a combination of decline and miles on the clock for Guida, because he's been through about 5 different eras in the UFC. He's fought guys, you know, super far back years ago, and is fighting the current era as well. So, yeah, look, a win against Clay Guida right now in where he is in his career, you know, he's not the fighter he was 10 years ago or 5 years ago. So, you know, there's no disrespect there or love for Clay Guida. I've loved to watch him fight. I've been watching the UFC, you know, when he was making his UFC debut. So I've seen him throughout his entire career. I love Clay Guida. But that's where Joaquim Silva's at. Jesse Ronson, Clay Guida. Now with Claudio Puelles' wins actually, you know, are kind of on that similar level as well. Like, he went on a win streak, which was great, and everyone was like super hyping him, and he was finishing fighters. And again, like, he's still super young as well. But when you actually look at the wins now, you're thinking, okay, well, these are wins that he should be winning, and Joaquim Silva would likely win as well. Again, against a Clay Guida, for example. But the thing is with Claudio Puelles, you look at the losses, and this is where it gets really difficult to make a prediction, because his losses are against Dan Hooker and Fares Ziam, which are 2 fighters that would absolutely beat Joaquim Silva as well. So Puelles is in this weird scenario where, again, I've said it already about another fighter on this podcast, where he's winning against fighters that he should be winning against, but losing against fighters he should be losing against. So, like, where do you put him? Like, Joaquim Silva is probably in between the fighters that he should be beating and the fighters that he should be losing against. So it makes it a super close fight, right? Which is, again, is why the betting lines are close, which they are. So, yeah, it's like, it's a difficult one to predict because of that. Then when you look at age, Claudio Puelles is still super young. He's 29 years old. He's not even hit 30 yet. So Puelles is still young in this game. He's getting experience and he's fighting the right fights. Joaquim Silva is on the other end of the spectrum at 36 years old, closer to retirement than he is to his prime. So, you know, or maybe not close to his retirement than his prime, depending on when he's, you know, if you're priming at 32, 33, then of course that's an incorrect statement, but he's definitely closer to the end of his career than he is to the beginning of it. We'll use that phrase. So with Puelles is absolutely, I mean, you could argue that he's probably not even in his prime yet, but he's definitely getting there. And that's kind of where I'm leaning, because look, I'm not going to sit on the fence and say, oh, well, I don't know who's going to win and then move on to the next fight. I'll give you a pick and prediction. I think it's a super close fight. From a stylistic perspective, Joaquim Silva's going to be the better striker here. But I think if Puelles can get Silva down to the mat, I think Puelles can be an absolute nightmare on the mat for Silva. Even though Silva, you know, he's got BJJ tattooed on him, or Neto BJJ is the nickname, like, I do think Puelles is going to have a gap in skill on the mat, and he's sneaky good with the leg submissions as well, the knee bars, the heel hooks. So I just think Puelles could be a bit of a nightmare on the mat. I think Silva's going to try and hit him hard on the feet, but Puelles' striking isn't, you know, that's an improving aspect of his game. I think Silva's more dangerous on the feet, but I think Puelles' striking is probably good enough to be able to look to enter into takedown opportunities or to trip Silva down to the mat. And then the biggest gap in skill for me is the grappling, which is on Puelles' side, and that's the way I'm leaning. So for those reasons, I'm picking Claudio Puelles to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got the return, quite quickly actually, which is great to see, of Tatiana Suarez versus Amanda Lemos. And the reason it's good to see Tatiana Suarez back is, first of all, after a championship fight where, you know, a lot of people are favouring you to win the fight. I bet on Tatiana Suarez there. I thought she was going to absolutely demolish Weili Zhang, but it turns out she got demolished. But yeah, it's good to see that turnaround. She's not, sort of licking her wounds too badly. She's just wanting to get straight back into the cage, get straight back into the win column and start that surge up again. The other reason is Tatiana Suarez, obviously, she's had massive layoffs in her career through, real bad injuries, real bad health conditions, having to fight off pretty much everything that you could possibly imagine. And it's really, really good to see a fast turnaround for Suarez, because typically a few years ago she'd have had a fight and then you wouldn't see her for 2 or 3 years and she'll fight again. So to see her a few months after that championship fight, to see her again in the cage again so quickly is really, really good to see. Life definitely favouring Suarez at the minute. And I actually think this is a fight where it's a welcome back into the win column type of fight. And I don't mean that disrespectfully for Amanda Lemos. Like, Amanda Lemos is a good fighter. She's a tough fighter. Age, I think, is irrelevant here because she doesn't look or fight in a way that represents her age. So it is one of the cases here where age is just a number, as many people like to say. Amanda Lemos is tough. She hits hard. She's got a good Muay Thai. She's got a decent wrestling game, decent grappling game. But the problem here is there's levels to this. And Tatiana Suarez is, in my opinion, just going to come into this fight. She's got to mind her P's and Q's with Amanda Lemos striking, because she does hit hard. You can't ignore that. But I think she's going to get into her takedowns really quickly. I think she's going to destroy Lemos on the mat. Whether that's a finish early or whether it's a 3-round domination from Suarez, I think that's what we're going to see. Currently sitting at around -400. It's not often I say this, but there's probably value still there at -400. I'm shocked that it's not up at -600 or 700 or maybe even wider, which it might get to the longer we get through fight week. Suarez is going to probably be the first name in every single person's parlay as well. So I always say, a favourable parlay piece is a line that's likely to climb as well. So I do think Suarez's odds are going to get wider the longer the fight week goes on. But I just don't see, unless Amanda Lemos just comes out here and knocks Suarez out early to the point where she starts landing ground and pound and the referee stops it, I just don't see Lemos winning. Suarez, I think, is just absolutely levels above. And like I say, without any disrespect to Lemos, I think it's a welcome back to the win column type of fight for Suarez. I think she puts maybe 1 or 2 more together after this and she gets that title fight. Or maybe, Weili Zhang, if she has vacated that title to fight Shevchenko, maybe this is a fight Suarez wins and then gets an immediate title fight afterwards, which I hope we see with everything that Suarez has gone through. But for right here and now, I think she destroys Amanda Lemos. For those reasons, I'm picking Tatiana Suarez to win this fight. And in the next fight, I think this fight's going to be an absolute firecracker. We've got Jesus Aguilar versus Luis Gurule. And I just think it's an interesting fight. Jesus Aguilar is a fighter that's 5'4" and he's got a 62.5-inch reach, which I think might be the shortest reach in the entire UFC. Probably across both genders as well. Like, he has got a very, very small reach, but man, this dude packs power in his hands. Like, he winds up these absolute cannonballs, and he's got one-punch knockout power for such a lightweight class, for the men's weight classes in the UFC. And he's just a ton of fun to watch, because you know what his intention is. He's got a massive overhand right, he's got a big left hook, and he's got a sick guillotine. And that's Jesus Aguilar in 3 descriptive instances. Whereas Luis Gurule, he is definitely the more skilled fighter. He's definitely the more well-rounded fighter with a higher ceiling, striking more technical, wrestling background, grappling's good as well. Gurule is a fighter that is better than Jesus Aguilar. However, again, I don't watch the event, and I wake up in the morning and I look on Topology and I've seen that Jesus Aguilar is either won by guillotine or won by, left hook or won by overhand right, whatever Topology labels it as. I'm not going to be shocked. Gurule was beaten soundly in his last fight, knocked out in round 2 in a fight that he should have won and that was favoured to win, again, moderately favourably on the betting lines. And Ode Osborne isn't really known for his crazy knockout power, although he, I don't know why, because he does look like he hits hard and fast. But Gurule's supposed to have won that fight. He got knocked out in round 2. So if he's getting knocked out by Ode Osborne, I think Aguilar hits harder, and I think he is known more of a big puncher. So it could happen again. But I kind of think Gurule took that loss as a favourite that he's supposed to have won, that many fighters do in his position, and now he's fighting Aguilar. Is he going to lose 2 fights in a row that he should have won? I don't think so. I think that Gurule because he's more well-rounded and more skilled from that skill set perspective. I think that's going to get him through here. He's got to mind his P's and Q's. If I was Gurule here, I would just be on the outside striking in just to get your win. Not really overcommit too much with the striking, because then you might end up on the receiving end of a big bomb from Aguilar. And even though he's got a massive wrestling and grappling advantage here, and the thing is, once you get Aguilar on his back, that's when you can have a ton of success. But Aguilar is so sneaky at wrapping these guillotines. Like, is it worth the risk? And this is where it's going to be interesting from Gurule's game plan perspective, because is the wrestling and the grappling is a massive gap in skill here for Gurule. But the problem is that guillotine. Does he take the risk? It's going to be interesting. But look, I think he could win a 15-minute kickboxing fight against Aguilar. If he does wrestle and grapple and he just manages to make sure that head position's right on the takedowns and he doesn't get sucked into a guillotine, then he's going to win a wrestling and grappling fight as well. So, yeah, it's difficult for me to pick Aguilar, although I love the dude and he's going to wing bombs and he does have every chance of knocking Gurule out. I'm picking the more skilled fighter here with multiple paths to victory, of course. So for those reasons, I'm picking Luis Gurule to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Zach Reese versus Sedriques Dumas. Now, before I even looked at the betting lines here and I taped the fight, researched, got my analysis, I had Zach Reese winning the fight. And I had him pre-tape as well, pre-research. So yeah, I had Zach Reese pre and post. But what was really interesting is I didn't have Zach Reese at like a massively high clip. So looking at the betting lines, and you see Zach Reese at minus 250, which by the way is probably the average line. You can get him at minus 230. You can also get him at minus 275. But at like minus 250, I think the odds are wide there. Like, I don't think Sedriques Dumas is going to be outmatched by that much. Like, Dumas is, again, he's going to struggle against a certain level of competition. But there's also a certain level of fighter in the UFC that he'll be super competitive with. And I think the same can be said for Reese. I think against a certain level of competition, he's going to get beaten. And against a fighter in and around his level, it's going to be super competitive. And I think Reese and Dumas are very similar. Yes, I did favour Reese, like I say, post and pre, or pre and post. But look, I don't think Dumas is going to be like massively out of his depth here in this fight. I think he's going to have moments. I think he's going to be close. And again, I feel like I'm saying this every single fight now, but it's kind of relevant at least in my head and what I like to analyse and talk about. But if I don't watch this event and I wake up in the morning and Dumas has won, I'm not going to be overly shocked. Whereas someone at like minus 250 of an average line, you're probably going to be a little bit surprised if they take a loss, or at least you should be. But I'm not. I think Dumas has got the ability to withstand a storm against Reese. Maybe he takes Reese down and Reese is trying the arm bars and the triangles, and maybe Dumas doesn't, to succumb to a submission off his opponent's back. And maybe he grinds a fight out. Maybe Zach Reese tires and maybe Dumas takes over late. Like, Dumas, again, it's just like Reese. He's going to struggle against higher level competition in the UFC, at least right now, until we've seen some development. But I don't think Reese is that much higher level of competition that Dumas is going to struggle against. I think they're both very similar. But I do think Reese, the reason I do like him in this fight is, he's tall, he's long, he's fast, he's super aggressive, in your face, he'll put you on the back foot. And the reason I favour Reese is because I think Dumas on the back foot is not the same as Dumas on the front foot. Dumas on the front foot, he's got options, he'll mix things up, and he's good to see. But on the back foot, I think he's very defensively aware to the point where he's hesitant. And if you're hesitant against Zach Reese coming at you, he's going to flurry at you, overwhelm you, and he's going to land a barrage of strikes, which, one could knock you out. Elbow, knee, straight punch down the middle, even a head kick. So I think that Dumas is going to be on the back foot more than he's on the front foot, and that's why I favour Reese. But, like I say, if Dumas can get Reese on the back foot at times, then Dumas is going to do good work as well. So, yeah, I think the line's off, but I do favour Reese to win the fight. I'm picking Zach Reese to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Alessandro Costa versus Alden Coria. Now, again, I think this is a levels fight, and I actually like Alden Coria. I think he's going to get wins in the UFC. He's got an all-around skill set, good striker with some sneaky, deceptive power, get my teeth in, and he can wrestle as well, at least with, good with the trips. Top side is a good grappler, hunts the back. He's young as well, so I think Correa is going to be a fighter that is going to do well in the UFC. he's going to pick up wins. I think strategically, if he's managed right, he is going to develop in the right way as well. But the thing is, Alessandro Costa is just at a much higher level right now, much more experienced, fought and beaten better levels of competition as well. And I almost think this is a fight for Coria that they've took as a UFC entry fight. And what I mean by that is, look, when you sign a fight for the UFC, you sign into a multi-fight deal. So, the UFC don't put too much pressure on a fighter making the debut. If you drop your debut, okay, that's fine. As long as you've made weight and you've handled yourself professionally, you'll get other opportunities to get the win. So I think it's one of these fights where Correa's took his moment, he's took his shot. And look, the other side of this is mixed martial arts, and something fighters, at least in 2025, a lot of fighters don't realise is big risk comes big reward if you're successful. Like if Alden Correa comes in here and beats Alessandro Costa, well, wow, look what that does for Correa. Like he's suddenly hyped, everyone's talking about him. He's now heading towards the top of the division, all for taking one 15-minute fight in a promotion where he's already going to get another probably 2 or 3 fights after it to correct any mistakes he made on his debut that he wasn't supposed to win anyway. So for me, like I say, there's that chance Correa wins, big risk, big reward. But the thing is, I feel like it's a mountain to climb. Alessandro Costa's a sick striker with power, good combinations, good technique. He can mix in wrestling and grappling as well. And ultimately, I think right now, I think he's a better striker, he's a better wrestler, he's a better grappler with more UFC experience and in his prime as well. It's a tough one for Correa, but I completely understand why he's taking the fight. And if he can manage to pull something off, then, like I say, that big reward comes in. But I don't think the big reward's going to be there. And also, you can take a loss against a massive step up in competition because the UFC aren't daft as well. The UFC are going to know this is a big step up in competition. So even if Correa comes out there and goes to war with Costa, and even if Costa makes it clear and decisive, you can still make a real good case for yourself to the UFC in a loss. So yeah, look, I respect Correa and I think he will do well in the UFC, but for right now I think Costa's a level or two above him and better everywhere. So for those reasons I'm picking Alessandro Costa to win this fight. And in the next fight we've got another newcomer. We've got Alice Pereira versus Montserrat Rendon. Now don't get confused with Alice Pereira and Aline Pereira. So it's Aline Pereira that's Alex Pereira's sister. So Alex Pereira, UFC fan favorite, former UFC light heavyweight champion. Everyone loves Alex Pereira. So it's Aline Pereira that's Alex Pereira's sister. Alice Pereira has got no relation to Alex Pereira. So I know I've used a lot of A Pereiras there, but Alice Pereira making a UFC debut. She's a fighter that is super young, tall, long for the division, like really super long and tall for the division as well. Like I say, predominantly a striker, Thai style, will mix in some takedowns if the opportunity presents itself, but the takedowns tend to be body locks and trips. And she's okay on the mat grappling, but again, she's predominantly best striking. Now, against Montserrat Rendon is a fighter that I think is going to get beaten on the feet striking by Alice Pereira, but Montserrat Rendon is also a fighter that will look to get fights down to the mat. And the thing is with Pereira, you can still see that she's super green. The level of competition she's been fighting is not Montserrat Rendon. Rendon's probably the best fighter that she's fought. Montserrat Rendon, I don't think is going to go away too easily here. I don't think Pereira is just going to be able to slowly stalk forwards and, control the pace, distance and range of the fight. I think Montserrat Rendon will put up a much better fight than that. But that's what Pereira's been used to. She's been used to just moving forwards. She's been used to opponents just letting Pereira dictate that pace of the fight, which is super key. Because especially when the pace and the range, because especially when you're long, if you can dictate the pace and the range, then you're going to win all day long because you're tall and long. You'll just stay on the outside striking in. But I don't think Rendon is going to allow for that. I think that Pereira is going to be met here with a fighter that is going to be more rugged, more dog-like, and more skilled than she's met before. But I kind of feel like, again, with these young fighters that are hyped, that are coming into the UFC, that people are really getting behind early on because, they're super young, she is green and she's going to lose a fight at some point. Is it going to be Rendon? Well, it actually could be. Like, I don't know. It's a weird one here. Rendon, I think if she gets a wrestling going and she gets Ferreira down and really tests her, then we're going to see how good Alice Ferreira is off her backer or at least getting up to her feet. But I don't know. I do think Ferreira, the loss is probably going to be in the next one or two, more than I think it's going to be this fight. It's not a fight where I'd recommend being too invested in from a betting perspective, because if Rendon does come out here and win, I'm not going to be shocked, because, you know, she's the veteran and she's got that skill set and a style that Ferreira hasn't seen yet and a quality that Ferreira hasn't seen yet. So I won't be shocked with Rendon, but I do think Ferreira is a good striker, you know, volume striker, does well with the straight punches down the middle. I'm going to reluctantly side with Ferreira here, but I could definitely see a Rendon win. Definitely not too invested from a betting perspective, but I'm picking Alice Ferreira to win this fight. And finally, the last fight to break down, and it's one of the most intriguing fights on the entire card as well. We've got Rodrigo Cezinando versus Daniil Donchenko. Now, this is actually one half of the Ultimate Fighter 33 finale. Now, this is supposed to have been on the card a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know what happened to the fight. Even on Tapology, it just says fight cancelled. So I don't know, maybe there was a visa issue or a slight injury somewhere, or I don't know, logistically a problem, who knows. But the first Ultimate Fighter 33 finale happened a few weeks ago. This was supposed to be on that card, but it got set back to this card. And I love this fight. You know, I didn't watch the Ultimate Fighter from start to finish, but researching both of these guys, I think it's a real interesting fight from a stylistic perspective, because you've got Daniil Donchenko, who is super exciting. Like, he's going to be a fan favourite. Whether he wins or loses, he's going to win fights in the UFC. He's going to be a fan favourite. Comes forward, super aggressive, super dangerous, overwhelming pressure, in your face, looking to land combinations, looking to knock your head off. And he is the exact type of fighter where, if you're trying to convince one of your friends to get into mixed martial arts, you know, showing them a Daniil Donchenko fight isn't the worst possible thing you could do, you know. But on the other side, you've got Rodrigo Cezinando, whose striking is clearly a work in progress, but at least for right now, his striking is relatively competitive, so it can help set up and aid his takedowns, because Cezinando's a very, very good topside grappler. So Cezinando will shoot takedowns. They're not the most efficient takedowns. He doesn't complete at least what it looks at a very high rate, but he sticks to them. And he's also, although he slows down and he's definitely slower in the third round as he is in the first, his style is getting fights down to the mat, or his style is grappling. So getting fights down to the mat comes hand in hand with that. So his cardio actually holds up somewhat, so he can still shoot takedowns throughout the fight. Although, like I say, he does slow down naturally, which you would expect. But Cezinando, especially the half guard position, is so good as a blanket on top. Like, doesn't give his opponents too many opportunities to find space to escape back up to the feet. And like I say, he'll land his ground, he'll land some ground and pound, he'll look for submissions just to keep himself relatively active, somewhat active, so the referee doesn't split them up and stand them back up. But like I say, his ground game is very, very dominant. Now, with Daniil Donchenko, with the way he starts fights, he's very dangerous early on. But again, as you have to expect, with coming out at 100 miles an hour, he does slow down himself as well. And he's definitely not as effective in the second and third round as he is in the first. And, you could say the same thing for Cezinando, but I think Donchenko, once he loses his danger in fights, once that dangerous trait has left him, it's very difficult for him to pick back up and then give that fear to his opponent. Whereas with Rodrigo Cezinando, when he slows down, well, he just keeps on going at the takedown. And if his opponents slow down as well, then that's great for him too. And this is kind of where I'm leaning here, because, look, a Daniil Donchenko knockout early in this fight wouldn't shock me. Like, he's a better striker than Cezinando, and I could absolutely see, when you close your eyes and envision this fight, I could absolutely see Donchenko coming forwards early in this fight, landing a barrage of strikes, Cezinando backing up, ends up with his back or his shoulder against the cage, hands up, gets in like a slight turtle position against the cage, maybe drops and the referee stops the fight. So I could absolutely see that type of finish from Donchenko. But I can also see Donchenko throwing what he has at Cezinando not going anywhere, Donchenko slowing down, and just when you think that Donchenko might be 30 to 60 seconds away from winning the fight, he gets put on his back. And then Cezinando starts going to work, and then Donchenko slowed down from trying to get a finish. He also knows now if he overcommits, Cezinando can get him down and he's going to struggle to get back up to his feet. Then he starts to become super hesitant, striking because of that. Then Cezinando slowly starts to take over, and I see that as happening as well. But I see that as the more likely scenario than Donchenko just throwing a barrage of strikes at Cezinando in the first sort of like 90 seconds, 2 minutes of the fight and getting him out of there. I like Cezinando's style. He's been training at AK as well, which I actually thought the other day, you don't really see many fighters in the UFC out of AK anymore for some strange reason. Like, I don't know what it is. They've got insane coaches and an insane team over there. And it's one of the gyms I'd class as a super gym in America. But Noviu now, it's said that that's where his history was in his early MMA career. Looks like he's training at AKA now. Daniel Cormier was his coach, obviously, on The Ultimate Fighter, so maybe that's why he's gone there. So yeah, I like where Cezinando's training. Daniel Donchenko is on the Vegas circuit as well, so I actually like where he's training as well. I think it's a super interesting fight. I think it can go multiple different ways. Both fighters have got the path to victory. I just think it's going to be competitive. So again, to see a relatively sized favourite in this fight, where you can see Donchenko at like minus 250 in some spots as a relatively sized favourite, with Cezinando at plus 200 as a relatively sized underdog. I think the betting line's off for a fight where literally both fighters have got a legitimate path to victory. So again, in that type of close competitive fight where I could see the fighter winning with a legit path to victory on either side, not really sure from a straight pick and prediction perspective. So with it being a betting podcast, I'm going to side with the fighter that's the unjustified underdog in my opinion. I'm picking Rodrigo Cezinando to win this fight and become the Ultimate Fighter 33 welterweight winner. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. As always, thank you for everybody listening. Thank you for everybody tuning in. If you're on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, please come over to YouTube as well, which is youtube.com/MMA Play 365. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. It helps the algorithms. It helps the video reach more people, which should help the subscriber count as well. Like the video, that helps the algorithms as well. But the best thing about YouTube is if you disagree with any of my picks, if you want to tell me what your favourite underdog is for the event, what your favourite lock is for the event, what's your favourite parlay of the event, where we agree, where we disagree, any further questions on any specific fighters, then that's a place where you can leave a comment on the YouTube channel. It is me that replies to the comments. I am very busy with the other businesses that I run within the sport, so like I say, I always do try and get back to every single comment, and if I don't, I do apologise depending on how my week's gone, but I do try my best to get back to every single comment, and I appreciate everybody that shows the love as well. So that's all at youtube.com/MMA Play 365. Please like, please subscribe, please comment. And one last time, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend from a betting perspective, make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got Base AI, our UFC prediction software, solid AI on the betting subscription packages. That also comes with handicapper betting advice as well from myself that have been doing this for absolutely years, and beating the bookies all this time as well. And everything is super affordable, so you're not having to splash out a ridiculous amount of money. It's $5 for one event, $10 a month, or $99 for an entire 12 months of Base AI and betting advice. And that's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next week.